Welcome to Leadership Bites with myself, your host, Guy Bloom. This is a leadership podcast where I have conversations with colleagues, I chat with guests, and sometimes there'll be just me talking. You can connect with me at livingbrave.com, and when you enjoy the episode, subscribe and please tell everyone. So, Maria, absolutely fantastic to have you on this episode of Leadership Bites. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, it's been a little bit of a long time coming as we've managed to do diaries and this, that and the other, but it is great to be here. And of course, I know who you are. It would be great just for you to just introduce yourself to people so they have a sense of the person.
Okay, so I am the Director of People at a property consultancy business called Fisher German. We have circa 800 people spread across 26 offices in England, Scotland and Wales.
So we're going to jump in because we've been chatting before, and I think the fascination I have is around this whole, when we say people, this people piece and culture and teams. And
yes.
I think if I was going to start with, you're in this HR role, and I have a sense that HR has sometimes a caricature that goes with it. Like a sales team can have a caricature, and a customer service team can have a caricature. But so I'm keen, if somebody said to you, Maria, what's the real purpose of an HR department? What's it there to do? Now, it's not an assessment centre, so you feel free to answer as you see fit. But I guess that would be a good start to give people a sense of, do you know what, Guy? It's probably multifaceted, but here's my line of sight on it. Yes,
absolutely. In terms of what I think the function or the HR is, we are certainly not dictators or the fun police, or certainly a range of names that I have been called historically in the past, or the function has been referred to. I see it as an essential part of supporting the business to achieve its goals, ambitions. I'm also, so I sit on the senior leadership team. I'm also there as a challenger. I come from a very different background to the others on that leadership team. I think in a different way, and the idea is to sort of spark that conversation and make them look at things slightly differently from their general sort of view. I think it's there to work with, help, support, meet people where they are. We do the normal kind of life cycle things, getting people in, looking at their sort of journey through the business and then saying, goodbye when they decide to go. So we do all the, what I would call operational things. But I think the real value-added piece is twofold. One is the strategic piece in helping the business to deliver its goals, aims and ambitions through people. And the second is also meeting people where they are, understanding what's going on, and not just whipping out a policy or a guidance or a procedure when actually what they need is a listening ear or an understanding of how to work within the bounds of what they're going through.
And I find this one of the fascinating questions of balancing people and profit and managing the pragmatism of just human life. And as I've got older, so now being in my 50s, I've now come to understand that as you get older, more stuff happens to you. You carry more weight and etc. And I didn't see that when I was younger, but I do now. So I recognise that if it's going on for me, and actually it's probably going on for everybody else, and then you've got 26 offices with human beings in it, managing the the stuff of life. So I'm really interested in that, how to balance taking time with people and for people,
Yes.
but also driving commercial outputs and being seen to be valuable rather
Yes.
than helpful.
Yes. There is a huge commerciality to sitting down with somebody and meeting somebody where they are, because if they understand that actually a business wants to help and support them, then ultimately they may think twice about leaving. So, it aids retention. It means you're not spending as much in terms of recruitment cost. Productivity doesn't lower. While sort of people are looking for other roles, or they're quietly quitting anyway. So there is that sort of value added piece of, actually, I spoke to somebody today, we had a conversation, we sorted something out that was either niggling or huge, and both things can drive people from the business. And that means that they're going to stay, and actually they're more engaged. And every business is, I think, looking for the holy grail of engagement, because engagement increases profitability and productivity, which helps the bottom line. So anything that we can do around that is ultimately having a direct impact on commerciality and the bottom line. So we don't, it's not that every day is spent kind of sort of dealing with issues, but we do take the time to listen. And that listening takes lots of different formats. So it might take a staff survey and a colleague engagement survey. It might take the form of a pulse survey. We have bi-monthly meetings with our mental health first aiders, because as much as I love travelling round and actually getting to know people in the 26 offices, I can't be in every office at the same time, and neither can the team. So understanding what some of the issues are, so what the local issues are, and being able to address them. And one of the things that we introduced during COVID was something called Business Blend. So we have a computer system, it randomly matches two people in the business. You could be matched with our CEO, you could be matched with somebody on reception, you might unfortunately be matched with me. And for half an hour, you just chatted to somebody. So it builds the human connection, it builds the understanding. But from a commercial perspective, actually, we're understanding what each other is doing in the business. We're also understanding how we can cross-sell to each other and help each other. And again, it's that. So 30 minutes a month taken sort of out of actually direct working actually has helped to increase the opportunities for cross-selling our clients, improving profitability.
So this is this nature of tribe, really, to some respects. I often put up a quick diagram or flick it onto a flip chart that goes the individual, the team, and the tribe.
Yeah.
And I like that. I like this idea of this connectivity and this exposure to each other. For what reason? For exposure.
Yeah.
What's the purpose of it?
The business is a people business, and the relationships that it builds with its clients and internally. And one of the interesting things is that when we do our colleague engagement survey each year, it's the people actually that come out of it sort of the best, so they might complain about the processes or the procedures or things that, we haven't quite got right, because we're not perfect and no business is. But they all say how lovely the people are, how much they want to work with the people sort of in the business. And that's really important to us. It doesn't mean that we're not commercial. It doesn't mean that we're not driven. And actually driven is one of our values. But what it does mean is that, the people want to work with each other. They want to connect with each other. They want to understand that somebody working in this area over here could actually help somebody in this area over here. And that ultimately benefits the whole business.
That's lovely. I think when I hear that, it kind of fills me with a sense of joy to believe that that focus is happening. One of the things that I notice as I'm in organizations is that sometimes there is a perfect balance and sometimes it's not, where creating, and I'm careful when I say this, and I'm for those of you that might be listening, I'm doing inverted commas, a nice environment
Yeah.
is a double-edged sword sometimes.
Yes.
It can be that this is fantastic. I feel psychologically safe. I can bring challenge. I can be curious. I'm not going to be shamed. I'm not going to be embarrassed. And that's healthy. And then there's an element of safety where that doesn't, almost the crying wolf, where the psychological safety, especially in recent years with a form of language that has come out that actually allows us to be deeply curious and to say this is not as it should be, but also can be utilized and weaponized to kind of allow people to maybe step away from having the truly honest conversation, because actually it makes them feel uncomfortable.
Yes.
But actually, if you felt safe, you could have that comfortable conversation. So I just wonder about that balance between creating a great place to work, but also a place where we have the earnest conversations and we can actually lean into the truth.
Yeah. I agree. I think it can be difficult where everybody gets on so well that they can feel slightly or majorly uncomfortable about raising a point because they feel that may damage the relationship. They may cause difficulties and sort of upset. And so one of the things that we've done over the past couple, because we recognise that, one of the things we've done over the past couple of years is we've put all of our senior leadership, our senior leaders, so that would be 106 across the business, through our Insights Discovery Programme. So we understand, what our natural style is, how we like to interact, and we've developed that further into how we can work better together. What challenge looks like, what honest and open conversations look like. There's a book, and I can't remember the author, but I love the book, Radical Candor, and how people have had hot sort of conversations. So we're dealing with that. For our next level down, we've developed a program which basically is about sort of more around sort of line management, but included with that is a specific section about having these conversations about how you challenge appropriately, how it can feel uncomfortable, but it's the best thing to do, the best for the business. We've also talked as part of that is if you're receiving that challenge, how that can make you feel, and what what your sort of response, maybe your natural response might be, as opposed to kind of thinking through calmly and collectively, other sort of responses. So we did recognise that kind of sort of a few years ago that we're very nice to each other, and so therefore sometimes we don't challenge, and you can get groupthink. And again, I love the Matthew Syed's got a book on rebel thinking, and 2-3 years ago, I think just before COVID, what we did was we made that book available to everybody in the business. Rebel Ideas, that's it. And we made that book available to everybody in the business and said, this is this is the start of our journey in terms of that kind of sort of hot, candid conversations. And one of the things we really need to think about is we've been very successful up to this point, but we're going to have to think about sort of diversification and challenge and being inclusive, because we've grown and we'll have a wide range of different personalities in the business, and so therefore we need to think how everybody can feel like they are included and that they belong. And so that really has been our challenge. But yes, I completely agree in that it's safe and it's nice, but sometimes it's a bit too safe.
And that's a forever balance, I think.
Yeah.
that creating an environment where actually it is safe, but also it's safe to receive honest feedback. It's safe to have the honest conversation, and that's probably the real test, isn't it? If it's when somebody says they're a good friend, well, if they're a good friend, then you can tell them.
Yeah.
So that there's something really adult about that I really like. I love hearing that. You spoke about being a challenger in that senior team,
Yes.
and that's an interesting sort of. I mean, one could say, when you're at an SLT level, the role is to contribute and to be curious and to challenge. But specifically, what's your role in being a challenger in that space?
I think part of it is bringing to the table things that they will never ever have probably crossed their minds. We've just done a lot recently around sort of menopause and andropause. They were a group of 4 middle-aged chaps joined by a middle-aged woman. I fully accept, but certainly I've kind of sort of challenged and brought things to the table about kind of what's important, what's coming over the horizon, challenging their thinking sometimes around what good looks like. What we should be doing that sometimes hasn't even kind of sort of hit the radar, they're very. If you're into insights discovery, they're very red, and I'm not. Although I have, I have kind of sort of quite a strong streak of red, but I'm able to kind of sometimes I'm able to go, whoa, actually you're going a bit too fast. And we need to pull this back a bit because, on this journey, particularly if it's a change journey, we need to take our people with us. And it's all very well you being excited and thinking this is the best thing since sliced bread, but now we really need to kind of hone down on kind of what that looks like, how that will make people feel, how we're going to address that, and how we're going to kind of sort of overcome it. So I think in sort of terms of that, I've really added that sort of finance, and then sort of I suppose commerciality around. Looking at making them think about some of the unintended consequences of some of the decision making, and thinking actually, if we did this, that would give us a better payback or return than what you're thinking about doing now, rather than kind of them sort of going, because they're going at 1,000 miles an hour.
Do you know, there's quite a few things. I was literally just with a client yesterday. We were just walking from Euston Station to go and get a little bit of lunch, and they were just talking about somebody in the office who's just gone on HRT, what a difference it's made to that person. And I just said, I'm 53, and about 4 years ago I went on TRT. And what's that? I go, well, that's like male HRT, because there's menopause and there's andropause. What's andropause? I go, well, it's the male version of the menopause. Is that a thing? Yeah, it really is. I was like, yeah, it really is. Well, it can't be the same.
Really is.
I go, well, it's not the same because, obviously we're biologically different, but I felt flat, tired all the time, irritable. I mean, don't get me wrong, a bad night's sleep and I'm still as irritable as the next person. I took the jab and, literally that day, my life came back to me.
Yes.
I literally could reconnect with the world.
Yes.
And now when I'm talking and of course, so before that, I'd be coaching. I predominantly coach at a senior level, and I'm very often dealing with, men and women, but a lot of men who are in their 40s and up, and they have these symptoms. And I go, I want you to go and get a blood test. I think you need to have a look and just have a look. And the amount of time I get 3 months later, oh my gosh, I've gone on TRT, and it has absolutely brought my life back.
Yes.
And I've had phone calls from partners going, "Oh my goodness, I know I don't know you, but thank you." Not that I
Yes.
did anything miraculous. But you just note it, and of course, if you haven't had the experience, you don't know. But those things, bringing those things
Yes.
to the table, and even people that kind of know about it often don't know that much about it. So
Yes.
it's lovely that you bring that in and
Yeah.
you offer that. So that just made me smile because that was a conversation. That was a conversation yesterday, and what I hear in what you're saying is, I have referenced it before, but when I used to watch the Godfather movies back in the day, Marlon Brando was the Godfather, and I think it was Robert Duvall who was his number two, his consigliere. And I often think that a good HRD is somebody who is, I'm providing the service, we're doing all the admin, we're doing all that stuff that needs to do. We are a service provision, but actually we're consiglieres. We are offering counsel and insight and observation, maybe not from a position of understanding your part of the business as well as you
Yeah.
do. And I wonder how you win that, or convert might be the wrong word, or for those people that think HR and they value HR, it's a relatively easy step perhaps, but for those maybe that don't, and I don't mean that's what you've experienced where you are, but just that HR, when you're even advising your own people, look, if you're not valued, if you're not seen as being anything other than a service provision, how do you
Yeah.
move into that role of
Yeah.
counsel? Maybe where there's resistance, because can I just run my own business, please? And can you just crack on and stay over? How do you do that?
Um, when I joined Fisher German, and I'm sure they won't mind me saying this, but when I joined, there was 220 people, and there was me, and there was very little setup. They had some basics, but they had no HR system. They had data all over the place, and they had an idea of what they wanted, sort of from HR. And so basically, it's a partnership. So I did a bit of a beauty parade, and I went round. We had 8 offices at the time, and said, right, this is what I can do for you. This is what I can sort of deliver. This is what I anticipate that we're going to look like in a couple of years' time. And then I delivered. So I delivered on sort of what they wanted. That enabled the buy-in because there was a group of partners who were very keen for HR. There were some skeptics, and let's sort of say there were some not for me sort of. And so I knew it was some I'd already got on my side, some, and the rest of them needed to get on side. And so we that's what I did. I set out what I was going to set my stall out, set what I was going to do, and then delivered on that. That's which ultimately kind of sort of helped them. Definitely got to understand the business. I knew nothing about surveying when I joined. I know a lot more now, and I know a lot more about planning. So, definitely understanding the business, being curious about what they wanted, understanding what their constraints, their worries, their annoyances were, and setting out to establish the function in order to help them deliver what they needed to deliver on sort of both a daily and long-term basis. I think because we did, I grew the team, we delivered. They were then bought in. So when I would then go to them with, let's sort of say, what my team would call a harebrained scheme, or something that was sort of slightly off the shelf, from left field, they would go with it. They would kind of sort of bought into it. And that's how we have. And I'll give you an example, and I'm sure. We had somebody questioned me in the business. So they wanted me to go and do something, which was basically saying that their person wasn't performing. And I said, no, I wasn't going to do that. They weren't my team member. It was for them to do. And their response was was pretty much, well, what am I paying you for? And I said, well, you're paying me so I coach you so we don't get into this position again. And I reminded him about 5 years later, and he was, because we had moved on so much, he was horrified that he had said that to me. He was absolutely mortified. And so now, the function is seen as a value add, kind of how, what I would call him sort of partnership. We are consultancy, so we are there to help and support, and we work hand in hand, and we understand their sort of needs, and we provide the advice. And the business is split into 4 divisions, and so the advice that we give to one division may be different in terms of the needs that another division requires. I also provide some thought leadership, so I produce something that's called What Now, What Next. And so that looks at kind of things that are happening that we need to really kind of be thinking about now, but also what's coming over the horizon. What we really need to start thinking about now, rather than when it hits us. And how can we be, that employer of choice? How can we be leading edge, rather than just following everyone else, or what our competitors are doing, or what other people are doing. So it is your sort of your thought leadership, your strategic sort of piece of taking them from one place to another, but the basics have to be right. You can't do that with a function that's not delivering on everything else.
That really resonates, actually. So there's something here about foundational competence, absolutely having your ducks in a row, which means then that there's nothing to point at that's a distraction to what you might be offering. That makes a lot. That makes a huge amount of sense. And you just spoke there about almost, I think, that event horizon thinking, that bringing the outside in, or what the future may hold. How do you take that on board? Where do you take that information from that says that's something I should be paying attention to?
I do what I call a lot of horizon scanning. So I do a lot of reading, and whether that's articles from the internet, from books, I also magazines. I've got a really great network, and not just within my sector, but sort of outside of the sector, and I think you can learn a lot from what other sectors are doing. It may not necessarily be, you can't take it from here and put it in, but you might take it and tweak it, or you might use it as a basis for something. It might just give you that spark of an idea where you think, oh yes. The other thing that I do is that that creativity piece, I think, is quite hard to generate when you're on that day-to-day sort of grind. So I've got a little book that kind of goes with me everywhere. And if I see something, or I'm thinking about something, generally when I'm not thinking about work, so for instance, in a couple of weeks' time, I go once a year, apart from COVID years, to see my daughter in Australia, and I'll be walking around, and the team always say, you come back with, lots of ideas, because, I'm just walking around and I think, and it just pops in, and it's so much easier. So, if you're going for a walk in the morning, that's kind of that sort of idea sort of generation piece. And then you think, oh, would that work? And or what about this? And then I may bounce it off somebody in my network. I may sort of go and chat to somebody else, and that network is not just HR people. There's a couple of business leaders in there, a couple of kind of sort of MDs, and you just I've got some great coaches as well, and they really just help to sort of solidify, am I on the right track? Am I going off on a flight of fancy? Is this really going to work? And then if I think it's got legs, I'll then look at the commerciality aspects of it. What's it going to cost us? What's the return on investment? How would it embed? Does it sit with our culture? And that sort of type of thing. Is it something is stretching where we want to kind of sort of move us a bit? And if I think it's got, if it's going to get the return on investment that I think we should get, then I'll go and have a chat with our sort of managing partner, and he can either go yay, nay, or maybe.
So there's something, and I think this is a big thing that I really, really espouse, which is exposure. So what I think I'm hearing there is, from you, is I'm open. I listen, I watch, I read. It may not always be targeted, but actually that's okay. I mean, sometimes it is. I want to read about that. I want to understand it. But then also just, being very present in the world and and letting stuff come in to your kind of space, and some of it will be rejected, some of it will stick, some of it might attach itself to something else. But just allowing that to happen.
Yes. Or sometimes something that you think won't work now but is lodged in the back of your mind, and then kind of you can sort of bring it out. Podcasts are brilliant. You get to hear, from people themselves, what they're doing, what's working, what's not. And, if I'm particularly, if I'm traveling, if I'm going to another office, I'll stick a podcast on, and you can learn so much. And I just think they're fascinating. You get to delve in a way that you would never get access to that person at sort of any other time. And also one of the things that we do here at Fisher German is we give access to Audible. So you can pick, you might pick, the latest romance or crime thriller or whatever it is, but you can also pick, I've read some, I've had spoken to me, some fantastic books, to aid sort of my thinking.
I think that's one of the big things that I talk about when I'm working with execs. I want them to reinforce or to re-engage with the craft of just leadership. Maybe is an interesting phrase, but it's bigger than that, which is when I say, what books have you read this year? What podcasts have you listened to this year? And I just go through a list. There are some people that are relatively active, but there are some people that have nothing. They have nothing other than the environment that they're in.
Yeah.
And I think that limits you. And actually, I got pulled up some years ago when I was talking about leadership, and somebody said, yeah, but I'm into football, Guy. And I'm not into football. I don't follow it at all. And he said, but actually, of course, I like to watch the game. But actually, then I like the stories of the manager's behaviour. Then I like to hear about how they're dealing with, the footballer who's paid a fortune that thinks he doesn't have to turn up to training, and et cetera, et cetera. So actually, I take lessons from that, and I go, of course you do. And that was some time ago, but it kind of made me think, actually, it doesn't have to be about reading leadership books or books on culture. It's actually just having an awareness of the world.
Yes.
And actually, the lessons will come to you if you can frame them and maybe take it on board like that. So I think that's, I can tell the people that have no external inputs.
Yes.
Because when I'm talking to them, their point of reference is so narrow. That actually, I think in terms, I'd like to get onto sort of talent and bringing people forward, because I think there is something about being good at your job and knowing the politic that you're dealing with and all that. But there's that, well, actually, to be innovative and to have ideas and to bring the outside in, you need to be in the world.
Yes.
And I think I'm hearing that in what you're saying.
I think you've got to be really curious. I think if you want to be innovative or you want to, kind of do something. I mean, I always said to, so I report into, it's the managing partner, but it's the equivalent of CEO. So I always said I never wanted to be a caretaker HR. I didn't want to start in January, go through the whole cycle of performance reviews and pay review and whatever other projects and all stuff that comes in sort of the cycle. I never want to be a caretaker HR person. I want to be adding value. I want to be creative. And in order, to, I think, to be creative or to be innovative, you've got to be looking at lots of different things. And there's so many. I love so Timpson's. I think is a brilliant product, a brilliant brand, and I think looks really well sort of after its people. But then if again, like on the football analogy, if you look at the coach, the female coach of the sort of the England's women's football team, and you think, my thinking there, I'm sort of looking at her and thinking, how have you pulled those women together? You've made them into a real team, a real group that want to deliver. What is it about it that you have done in order to engender that? And that, so when you're looking at high performance teams, or you're looking at productivity or delivery or anything sort of like that, there's so many examples in the business, or in the world, where you can go, okay, well, they did really well. Okay, what was it about that? Why did that work? And asking the questions. I've got a really great mentor, and one of the things he said is, ask questions all the time. Ask questions.
It's I think when I'm looking at any senior team that I'm working with, I can see the team that is only focused in on itself.
Yeah.
Versus the ones that, yes, of course, are paying attention to that, but then are looking outside of themselves. And back to your point, looking at reference points that have, sometimes it's relevant to the industry and the market, but also sometimes completely disconnected, because it's a point of reference for, well, how did they do that then?
Yes.
And that it doesn't matter. Well, it's not our environment. Well, did the other people have arms and legs? Yes. Well, then they're human. So if it's human beings that went through that process, probably the context or the environment or the market, or that's almost an irrelevance. How did that person move that group of people to that place? And I think that's hugely important.
And I encourage also all those that report to me and the wider team, if you see something, if you're reading something or something like that, then the message or show us, or what's important. And so we've and I get lots of I'll get little links sent to me. I'll get other sort of things where they said, I've seen this is really good. And again, you've got the team thinking and being curious and looking wider and doing sort of different things, and that that's really helpful when you've got the whole team doing it.
Yeah. So when you're looking at an organisation that, obviously you're bringing people in, and I have this little thing, which is you take people for a ride, but in a good way. You attract them, you recruit them, you induct them, you develop them, you engage them, and you exit them potentially. Yeah. So I like that. It's the way I can remember it as a whole process. But the thing is, I had Rachel Facardi on, and I hope I'm saying her surname correctly on the podcast, talking about generational stereotypes and things like this. So I'm really interested, because again, depending on where you look, Gen Z, Gen X, Gen Y, you've got to talk to everybody differently. And I've kind of almost come to a position of, well, no, you don't, because actually we all want at the core shared things. Yes. And I just wonder, we want to work in a place that feels safe. We want to be valued. We want to, and I don't really care what generation you are at a human level, you kind of want the same thing. But I just wonder if you've seen a shift, and I'm being maybe a little bit superficial there, but just for the sake of the conversation. But what do you see, particularly maybe in your place and space, that is there a shift in what people want? Or actually, Guy, probably not. It's just human beings who want the same thing. Or no, you've got to be very sensitive to the needs of different generations, or you need to be alert to it. But the reality is, how do you see that generational spectrum that seems to be ever growing?
we have a reasonably big sized early careers function. So we take degree level apprenticeships, summer students, year-long placement students and graduates. And so this year we'll be taking 35 graduates, 10 placements. We've taken 20 summer students, I think a couple of degree level apprenticeships. And that adds on to our existing 40 graduates, so around each year we've probably in the business got around sort of 100 graduates, and then some will qualify and etc. So and I think I agree with you. I think the baseline is the same. People want to feel like they belong, that they have a place, and that's a reasonably safe place. And that works really well. I do think there are different needs across the business. Sometimes it's driven more by role. Sometimes, there's lots of intersections, I believe. Sometimes it's driven by role, sometimes it's driven by level, sometimes it's driven generationally, and sometimes it's individual. And I think the one thing that sort of post-COVID I've become more aware of is this individualism. You can't just take a sheep dip approach and blanket everybody.
Gen X are like that.
Yeah.
So if you're that age, that's like saying because you're a Sagittarius.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's about as scientific. Yeah. So pretty much. So we're doing a lot to sort of looking at how we, which comes back to how we meet people where they are, not they're in this age bracket or they're this demographic or they're in this role within sort of the business. How do we meet those people kind of sort of where they are? Because ultimately people have different needs, and I always say, in the days before hybrid working, people don't leave their lives at the door. When they're coming through the door at 9 o'clock in the morning, everything that's gone before that, whether they've had to, rush like crazy to get their kids into school, get ready, get up, whether they're not feeling it, whether they're actually not well, whatever it is, whether they've had a massive argument with their partner before they've kind of arrived, that doesn't, that ends when I come into it. That doesn't. We take the whole person into work, and and we have a responsibility and duty of care for that whole person, because that when they leave the door, work goes with them as well. So that's where I come from in sort of respect to that. We have a whole duty of care. And what comes with that is, their life. And sometimes, their life comes into work, and you look after them and support them. And sometimes it can come in the wrong way, in which point you kind of sort of sort it out. But that's kind of sort of how it is.
I like that. I think there's something here about these things exist for a reason, because probably there are statements that you can make around things. But actually, if you actually start to widen the net, you've really said there, it's not as simple as how old you are. It's what's going on for you in your life. It's about where you are in your career. It's about what's going, et cetera, et cetera. So actually, to actually say a certain group of people require a certain thing, that's like, the joke is, it's like, well, the French are like this or the English are like that.
Yes.
You go what,
yes,
all
absolutely.
of them? That doesn't.
And I think, at certain times of life, you put your foot on the accelerator. At certain times of life, you may just want to come in, do a great job, go home. At other times, you might want a break, so you might want a sabbatical, or you might want a longer holiday, or you just might want to step out. And when people step out, and so when I first joined, I think people were slightly wounded if people decided to leave. And the education piece has been, well, do you know what? Let's give them a really great send off, and hopefully at some point they'll boomerang back to us. And if they do, they will have added to their skill set and knowledge and experience, and we will benefit from that. And I think that's kind of really, really important. And the other thing that we've done around our sort of early careers is we've widened the entry points. So historically, there was only 3 unis that did our degree, the degree that we needed for qualification into the particular surveying field that we're in. And so we completely widened it and said you can come with any degree. We'll sponsor you to, get accreditation. We'll support you and train you, and that's been great as well because that's brought different individuals into the business from different sort of backgrounds, different thinking, different approaches. And again, that, as I say, that's kind of sort of worked really well. But I don't think you can take this paintbrush and say, well, you're all over, I don't know, 45, and so you want X. You're all over, you're all under sort of 25, and so you want that. You're all in sort of, administration, or you're all in HR, or you're all surveyors. It doesn't work like that. We meet people kind of where they are.
You've said that a few times, actually, meeting people where they are. And I quite like that. I talk about connection in the sense of the willingness to, the willingness to contribute outside of your own need is my reference point, which is, I think, is that, as in this is, maybe I do have an agenda, but I need to meet you where you are. I love that phrase. I think that works incredibly well. And there's something about, and maybe that's one of the big things for a leadership team, is how do you factor in your need for output and your need to be alert to, pay attention to, yes, but that's almost a duty of care. You don't need to go around everybody's house for dinner, but there's a midpoint of paying attention and being willing to connect, even if that doesn't necessarily mean friendship, and that doesn't mean they're your favourite cup of tea, but that willingness to be present, because you've got to be present to pay attention to the fact that people are different, etc. Yeah. So that feels like a thread there.
So for example, I agree. We've got 800 people. I've not got 800 friends. It's not kind of sort of one of sort of those things, but it is understanding where sort of people are. So our managing partner, over the course of this year, has gone to each office and either set up and had breakfast with people or had lunch with them. So they can basically kind of sort of say anything, feedback anything that they want to. He does a regular, every 2 months, he does a vlog, so that people can understand what's going on and they understand where the direction of travel of the business and what's important to the business, where the finances are, how we're doing, etc. So we do that as well. But we are a connected sort of business, and we do a fair amount around sort of social and well-being. So last month we had our annual sort of cricket match, but we're doing a walking challenge this month, September, we make sure that there is an opportunity and to connect, get together in whatever that may look like. One of our divisions is planning a big sort of opportunity, sort of away day. Our graduates come together on sort of training days, particular levels in the business will also sort of connect. So there's lots of opportunities to connect. They'll have friendship sort of groups, and they may, if they've gone through uni together and they're kind of sort of progressing together, that's fine. So we've got friendship groups, but we also provide this opportunity to connect and lots of opportunity to look at and support people's physical and mental kind of sort of well-being. Because we all know if people are feeling better, then you're more productive at work. If you're feeling sort of sluggish or tired or burnt out or stressed or whatever it may be, then actually you're not going to be productive at work. And that's not going to kind of sort of help in the long run.
I've written down a few things here. I've just heard you speak, which is around opportunities to engage. There's connectivity. There's an element of community, and that doesn't mean we're in a commune, right?
No.
Let's be clear. And that's the thing people fear, isn't it? Oh God, I've got to go. No, you don't have to join the happy clappy club, you know. But
nothing is compulsory. Nobody has to kind of come along and sort of
actually,
attend
you're creating,
if they don't want to.
Yeah.
Which is why we provide a variety, so if you look at our sort of approach to kind of sort of well-being, there's the in-person activities. We also have a portal where, if your preference is to read or to listen, or to actually engage in kind of online live sessions, then we run those as well. So you can pick out kind of what works for you. If you're more of a reflector, I want to go away and read this and understand it, and then I may come back and ask questions, or actually I want to be in the live debate on something, then we kind of sort of run those. We so for our menopause, andropause, IVF, baby loss, and neonatal sort of policies, we've sought the advice of those people who actually have had that experience. We've said you don't have to be involved, if you prefer to steer away, but if you would like to contribute, because we, whilst we can write the policy, we can't make it very practical or understand it if we've not been through it. And what we might be writing may not be great. And so we also, always make sure that we involve people in our sort of policy development to make sure that it's relevant. So there's an opportunity to be involved, be included if you wish, share experiences, but it's not like a press gang or you must come along and do this or anything in that sort of shape at all.
I let words jump into my head sometimes to summarise what I think I'm hearing. And vibrations, I think you're creating vibrations. I think you're creating, and for some people that will be a very loud one, and for others it will be slightly off in the distance, i.e. what they're connecting to.
Yeah.
But it's almost like, if you're the spider's web's in the middle, you're all attached to it. So you do know it's going on. You can be a part of it. You're going to hear the stories and the memories other people are having from it. And we can all be in a family there's the family member that likes to organise everything. There's the family member that likes to attend, and then there's the family member that likes to hear the stories of it. And we may all, do you know what I mean? And it's okay, isn't it? It's okay. We don't all have to be there going rah, rah. But you're creating an environment, and you're creating a set of actions.
If you've got this pool of talent of 800, and each of them is individuals, there will be commonalities, there'll be intersections, but ultimately you've got 800 individuals. I think you've got to try and provide the variety of opportunities to access, whatever it is they need to sort of access or be involved with in a way that suits them. So my team did a great presentation to the rest of the team on hidden disabilities. So they did. So we had autism, and so one of my team has got ADHD, and there was lots of other hidden disabilities, and that then started and helped us form our chronic sort of illness approach. Looking at, because during the course of your lifetime, young or old, something may happen to you. And it doesn't say, an illness doesn't say, okay, well, I'll hit you 2 years in. You've started employed and I'll hit you. It might hit you sort of 6 months after you joined. It might hit you kind of sort of, much sort of further down sort of the line. It might be serious, it might not, but it might need help and sort of support. And it's kind of sort of building that understanding of neurodiversity and the diversity of kind of sort of just across 800 people who are different with similarities.
Different with similarities. That should be a T-shirt. Yeah, we're different we're different with similarities. That's our clarion call. So I've just really got one couple of quick questions, but one of them is just what are you paying attention to? What if you look about where you are right now, but you look forward 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, whatever your kind of event horizon is, what are you paying attention to?
I think there's a lot of noise around and a lot of chatter, certainly in the forums I'm in, about sort of return to the office. And personally, and this is my personal sort of is that I like being in the office, but that's my personal choice. As a manager and a leader, I'm just interested in the outcomes and the output. And to be fair, I'm not. If somebody wants to do it in their home, or they want to go and take a break and do it in the coffee shop, or in a different office than their standard, I'm really not bothered. I'm just interested that we're delivering. But my personal preference, because for me, when I work at home, I don't stop. I seem to not be able to have a boundary at home. I just kind of sort of carry on. Whereas if I'm in the office, I'm very good, and I was like, right, I'm going home now, and that's it. That's kind of sort of probably about the way in which I work. But I think I see lots of chatter about organisations saying you've got to be back in, and I can understand it, because the collaboration piece, the culture piece, the connectivity piece, for some people, it is really needed. I know that other people will much benefit from having quieter space, time on their own, not being overstimulated by, kind of being in sort of a big office with, lots of people and lots of interactions kind of sort of going on. So, which brings me back to the sort of, the individual piece, and looking at people as individuals rather than looking at the whole, regardless of how your preference for working, regardless of actually how, where you are more productive and how you are more productive and the way in which you work. I'm a morning person. I'm generally in the office for 7, and that's it. By about 4, I'm waning. I need a break. Even if I then come back to something, I need a break. I know other people who are better starting at 10 and going all the way through. I know people who are better being somewhere quiet, because otherwise they're overstimulated and they find it really uncomfortable. Other people need to be together. They need the fun. They need the interaction. It's particularly if you're probably having a bit of a bad day, you need that kind of ability to be able to let off sort of steam. And I think businesses are slightly forgetting that in this whole desire to get everybody back into the office.
So that's what you're saying. Do you have a kind of how are you managing that? How is
our balance at the moment is hybrid working. We don't, I've talked a lot about connectivity, and we don't want to lose that sort of connectivity. I think it's really important, and you need the connectivity with the business. Because when people lose that connectivity with the business, they start to disengage, and that's when they're quitting or quietly quitting. And so we work on sort of a hybrid model. That said, that's kind of our policy. But approaches can be, well, actually, although our hybrid model sort of says, we're going to be in the office sort of 3 days a week. This week, because we're all out and about, we won't be in the office. It's driven by the needs of what we're doing. And that's kind of sort of, how it works. And if you work in surveying, it's such a brilliant job, because you're never stuck behind a desk. You will be out and about a lot. you'll be at clients or client sites, or you'll be off somewhere, meeting maybe with other consultants or contractors or that sort of type of thing. So it's not, it's not rigidly kept to. It's there for guidance and collaboration. Yeah.
Okay, so here's my thank you. Here's a real 2 quick questions. One is, what did it feel like when you won HR Leader of the Year, winner 2023? Maria, tell me about that.
Stunned. I don't think anybody was more stunned than me. I was nominated by one of my team, and I didn't know I'd been nominated until she told me I'd been shortlisted. So I was like, oh, okay. Well, I won't win, because I never win anything, so I won't win. And then I was asked if I'd be sort of on a panel there, and I was quite really happy to go. And so I went along. There's me and my senior people manager, and we went along, and they had sort of the 10 shortlisted people sort of on the screen. Some amazing people there, and then they took names off one by one until mine was left, and I was sort of kind of wanted to go, are you joking? But absolutely delighted. But I did come back in the following morning. The team had done like a champagne breakfast, and I came back in, and I just sort of said, you know what, I got to get the award, but the award is for them, because they make me look pretty damn good.
Bingo, love it.
Yeah.
Well, listen, you've been an absolute joy. Thank you so much for taking the time. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I think you've got a lovely approach. I think the way you talk about these things, I can hear the passion. I can see the clarity in where you're coming from. So it's a beautiful thing just to spend a bit of time with you. So thank you so much. But do stay on for a few minutes when I press the stop button, just to make sure everything uploads. But just from me and all those, the 3 listeners, hopefully there's a few more, but thank you so much for coming on this episode.
No, thank you.
That's it. So I hope you enjoyed the episode. Please share so others get to hear about us, and subscribe so you keep up to date on new episodes. Also visit livingbrave.com if you want to connect with me and find out more about executive coaching, team effectiveness and changing culture. Oh, and of course you can buy my book Living Brave Leadership on Amazon. So on that note, see you soon.